We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work in Mi'kma'ki as a steward of the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. All right. We have a very interesting agenda today. It's been a while since this committee's met. Can we get an approval of the agenda?
Second.
Moved by Warden Weber, second by Councillor Asif. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. I trust everybody's reviewed them. I have a motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Coolin, seconded by Councillor Bremner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. All right. Presentations and discussion topics. First topic, subdivision bylaw, municipal specification, and sewer bylaw overview. All right. Oh boy, we got lots of high-powered staff at this one. That's good. All right, good.
Good morning. So yeah, we're going to kind of tag team this, and the intent here, as you probably know, so reviewing our subdivision bylaw has been a topic that we've been looking forward to getting to, and through the help of some consultants, that work is now well underway, and we have a first sort of an internal draft prepared. But before we went through any further engagement, either, and we'll talk about that at the end, some industry engagement and then public engagement, we wanted to bring this to policy and strategy and give council a high-level overview of sort of some of the changes and highlights from what's changed. These documents are often fairly boring, I'll say, maybe if you just pick it up and read it, but there are some really important things in there that have a widespread effect. And while the subdivision bylaw is being reviewed, we also have the sewer bylaw and the municipal specifications. So Tammy's going to speak to those a little bit. And the intent was to have those three done together so that language, terminology, and everything flows well, because those three do interact a fair bit. So yeah, excellent. So just to give you a quick idea of what we're going to do, we'll start with just a quick little bit of background, so why the review is needed, then go through some of the municipal specifications overview, sewer bylaw, and then finish up with the subdivision bylaw, and then finally just talk very quickly about our plans for engagement and next steps. Next slide. So why this is needed. So the subdivision bylaw is one of our planning documents, just like the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw. And so therefore it is due for review. And this has been planned going back to 2013 or 14 when we started the municipal plan review. The intent was to review those three documents, the municipal plan, the village plan, and the subdivision bylaw. So see on the slide there, it's taken a good amount of time, but we've gotten some good work done, and now we're on to the subdivision bylaw as the final of those three documents. Current subdivision bylaw, as you can see, was adopted in 2000 and then last amended in 2008. So that's a fairly yeah, been quite a while. So it's definitely good. Things have changed. There's some new topics and subjects, and just through administering that bylaw for that amount of time, you come up with things that you might like to change or at least bring up for discussion. Turning over to the sewer bylaw, again, last amended 2014, and again, Tammy will speak to a bit more here, but generally we were trying to align terminology with the municipal specifications and the subdivision bylaw. Next slide. The municipal specifications, again, approved in 2008, and similarly, just an update there, and again, with this one particularly, address sort of emerging issues that have come up since 2008 and the new kinds of development. So, Tammy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. So the municipal specifications, as Garth was saying, it's been a while. Designs have changed, environment has changed, vehicles have changed, so our roads, designs, sewer designs, water designs, we all just have to bring them up to date to today. So the proposed new direction is basically just coming online, getting our subdivisions safer, our storm that we can actually integrate new technology in our roads, make our roads wider, safer, slopes, and emergency access, as we know with the wildfires, like all that kind of thing. We're trying to bring this in so that we can make safer communities. Next slide. So the general updates in each of them, subdivision requirements. So a checklist of what each stage of the subdivision, primary design to close out. So how do we make it flow better for our developers? The street design, street lengths to make sure they're safe for cul-de-sacs should be a certain length. If they are any exits, if it's no exit, we got to get people out in case of a wildfire, flooding, whichever. Stormwater with our new floods, our data is outdated, so we need to get better with what we are accepting for design. Wastewater, just updating the gravity in our pump stations. We're gonna put a water section in. Hopefully someday we'll have water, but it'll already be in there with the good standards when we're ready for that. And then service easements, make sure that we have the best practice for easements, that we can actually maintain them, operate within them, and have them in place at the start. The sewer bylaw overview, basically, again, it was outdated. The new document will modernize our wording, make sure we're actually using the proper terminologies. Address administration, service connections. Basically, we're just giving it a good update. Again, the wording, is that the same? Anyway, clarity, how we're discharging it, how we're building it, what exactly we want for pump stations, so we have a unified from one end to the other, so we don't have multiple different uses and different pumps everywhere, so we can have a good background, a good supply too for maintenance. And teeing in new updates from Nova Scotia Environment, increasing fines and penalties, and appeals will now go to council if they're appealing anything, and the MGA will be added to the wording, which was not in there before. That's you. Yay.
Amy's like, she's done. So if anybody's ever read our very boring but to me exciting subdivision bylaw, it is quirky. We have a lot of interesting quirks, and some of those quirks are problematic for property owners. And some of them are problematic for us. So, for example, our open space right now, we have a very base schedule of, okay, you need to meet these criteria, and then council, your hands kind of get tied of like having to accept this because it met the criteria we set out in the subdivision bylaw. But it may not actually be useful or practical for us. So we've collected a little handful of lots solely only be able to use for recreational purposes that really are not practical for anything we're going to do. So the goal with the new update is to flip that. So one, to put that control of what do we want into council's hands and the municipality's hands, and ideally start at the cash value first, because then that gives us more freedom to either continue with what we have or expand. But we don't want to hamper ourselves in the other way, so we also have some intention in there to say, but council, you have the option to consider infrastructure on recreation if it meets certain standards, or you will have the option to consider land if it meets the standards that we want, and it's something that we think would be acceptable. So it's a bit of a flip. We're also, sorry, can you just go back a bit? We're also proposing to change a little bit how the cash value is assessed. So right now we waive the first 3 lots of any subdivision from any cash value, and then everything past that is 5%. That is fine, but if we add a little bit for the first 3, one, it makes it easier to track because then we're not going back into old subdivisions to see was that first 3 already used. And for the property owners, they know what to expect. It's more consistency, which is the big driving force through this update, in my opinion, to just put a very small cash value. So not the same amount, but a smaller value for the first 3, and then go back to the 5%. Okay, go ahead. Thanks. Access exemptions, so right now we have a couple interesting, one's a standard, almost everybody's got it, it's a pre-1987 access exempt lot, and that basically means you can create a lot that does not have direct frontage onto a public road or a suitable private road. And then we have a very unique one that we have done with policy, where it's tagged to the ownership, how many people own that land as of the date of our bylaw. But the language in it is cumbersome because it does not require it to be the same ownership, and it's not universally applied. So if you were one owner at that time or you're a company, you don't get to utilize that. So we're trying again to sort of standardize this so that, one, we as staff have a cleaner starting point, so that we're not having to take so much time to go through old subdivisions, old deeds. And for the public to have a cleaner view of, I know I can do this or I know I can't, or their surveyors. So we're going to bring forward for your consideration proposal of just adjusting that and kind of starting with a new date. And private roads, so this is probably the most problematic but also in some ways beneficial piece of our subdivision bylaw. So we allow private roads, and we're not suggesting we don't allow them in the future. However, particularly after the last several years with the floods and with the fires all around us, emergency access and the standards of private roads have become very important for the public. We hear about it probably weekly. Almost every subdivision plan we deal with, somebody brings that conversation forward. And right now we don't have that standard for a big chunk of what we do for subdivision. So right now we call it the 6 lot limit, where you're allowed to do 6 new lots on a private right-of-way, but that private right-of-way does not have to be built, let alone to a standard or anything. And we're a municipality that allows for a lot of development on one single lot. So you can't even be thinking that, oh, that just means 6 houses. That could mean 24 houses, that could mean 66 houses, depending on the zone and what the development happens. And for the emergency side of things, that's probably maybe not the best practice anymore, just given how climate has changed since we originally did this plan. So we're looking at, similar to what we're doing under the municipal specs, is bringing in some modest criteria for when people want to do a base private road. And that's also why we looked at the access exempt to see how we can adjust that, so we don't, because we do recognize we also have a lot of really far off into the woods, people, big lots of land that people might want to carve out for like their children or something. So we don't want to lose that, but we do want to make sure true development is safer. So part of the municipal specs will have, and Tammy alluded to it, some private road standards for that, and that's a big part of to try and shift how we do this. The other thing I will say with this, how we handle private roads right now, is if you are a private owner on a lot that is on a private road, you have zero idea whether you can subdivide. Whether or not you could subdivide your lot today. Your surveyor does not even know that. They have to call us. We have to do a road review. So depending on how far back in they are, that could be like tens of kilometers of roads. So that's time for them, it's time for staff. But more importantly, they don't know. They own land and they don't know what they can do with it, so they can't plan for that.
And just to jump in, that can literally take half a day to a day of a development officer's time.
Yeah.
To just do that review, which is only good as of the time it's done. If somebody calls back a month later, theoretically, they have to go
Yeah.
double check that again, because something else could have changed in there since that
Yeah.
time.
Because it's on that road right of way. It's not, oh, I have this specifically to myself. All your neighbors share that pool. So it's kind of the first person that uses it, and then it's gone.
One example I often use is Fox Point Lake Road, because you get those networks of roads that just branch off, and so you
Yes.
have to connect,
Yes.
you have to count all the way back to where it connects to the public road.
Yeah.
So, and we have lots of examples
Yeah.
across the municipality.
So that's the 2 categories we're looking at. Essentially, we're looking to pair it to the same level of our standard, where there's only so long we let somebody be with a cul-de-sac, or like a single entrance, where they don't provide that secondary entrance. So, and that is for safety and all those other reasons. So we're looking to essentially use that as the same benchmark of the 2 private road standards. Minimum frontage and lot area. So currently, lot frontage is determined by the road authority and the provincial subdivision regulations. Most outside of the village, it's a minimum of 6 meters. That is technically not enough to actually put a driveway in, right? That's 20 feet. The province requires a minimum of 15.5 meters, which is why, and they're actually looking, from what I've had conversations with them, whether it comes to pass, they're looking at increasing that to 16. That is why in the village, when we did the land use bylaw, we said, okay, let's mirror them if they're all municipal, or they're all provincial roads. So in the municipality, everybody could subdivide off of a 6 meter right of way, but that's not actually practical. And what happens is they'll give road frontage technically of 6 meters, but then it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've got 4 of them all coming out. Realistically, that just turns into a right of way that may or may not meet a standard. So we're looking to become more consistent, ideally, with the province and even with our municipal specs of requiring a certain road frontage. And that is the other side of this, is that as they design roads, if they don't meet the frontage for safe driveways, then the ability for them to turn that over to us in the future becomes compromised. Right? So if we at the start say, you need to give us enough frontage so that if you decide down the road, as this development is done, and your community says, hey, we would actually like these to be municipally owned, they have the ability to make sure that there's enough room to put your driveways in there. It's kind of sad to say, your design's fine, but your driveways don't meet, and therefore we can't take it. And lot area, typically right now, outside of the village, it is determined by Nova Scotia Environment's requirements for on-site septics. But we do get a lot of is, and even Nova Scotia Environment is not particularly set up for this, is people coming in saying, I want to do a small lot that is undersized, so it does not meet the Nova Scotia standard, or Nova Scotia Environment standard for being able to sign it off as not intended for development, for a on-site septic system. But their professional signs off saying, this has not been assessed, it's not intended to ever have a septic system, and then we're creating very, very small lots. Once those are created, we don't have an ability to come back and say, I'm sorry, we can't give you X, Y, Z. We have no control over environment, whether or not they then give them some version of a variance of an on-site septic system. And in the past, I always used to hear very strongly, if that happens, we'll never allow a system on that. We only allow for variances or alternates on already existing small lots that were done for our regulations. That is not the case in my experience anymore. I have seen people be approved for holding tanks for a house, and all these other sort of options. And I think personally and professionally, I think we're setting ourselves up for issues down the road for future owners. If we don't start requiring people to say, you have to, where you're not connecting to our sewer system, your lot needs to be large enough to have an on-site septic system. And then letting that be determined on the assessment from Nova Scotia Environment and their regulations. So that's part of the lot area piece in there. Yeah, and then so we are also looking at bringing in a small, it's basically mirroring the village, minimum area for municipal sewers, to say that you have to be somewhat, and it's very small, it's like 700 meters squared. We were just looking to mirror the village, right? And some of that is character pieces. These can also be picked up in the land use bylaw. That when we do our plan review, those may change wildly, depending on community character and what comes out of those in several years. It's titillating stuff.
And I
Trying
guess,
to stay awake.
I guess I'll pick this up here. This is pretty much it, and there's not a whole lot here to say, other than as the subdivision bylaw gets moves forward towards adoption, there will be some policies in our planning strategy that need to be updated to enable some of the provisions that we are changing or want to implement in the bylaw. So this is basically just a note to say, when the municipal and village plan reviews were done, there was a section on subdivision, and we essentially just carry forward the existing policies with the understanding that after those two reviews were done, we were going to do a subdivision bylaw review. So when we bring the draft subdivision bylaw forward for council approval, there will be a set of NPS amendments to accompany that, just to enable everything that we're doing. And last slide. So yeah, so next steps. So this, what I will say is, this is our proposal, but we're of course open to feedback and comments from council. So what we had planned to do next is to distribute drafts to a select group of industry, so engineers, developers, and related professions in the area that we work with. We came up with a good list amongst between development and public works of all the folks in the area. So the plan is to, if council's okay with that, to send them the draft for a week or two to review and then bring them in for a session to get feedback. Those are the folks that, you know, may have more specific feedback on some of the nuts and bolts and the technical aspects of it. And then of course that feedback would be collated and brought forward for council. And then following the industry session, our proposal would be to initiate our standard public engagement program. So we would host a public information meeting, bring it to planning and advisory, assuming that the committee is up and running at the time, and then back to council for first reading.
Okay.
Yeah. Glad you're doing it.
I'm sure there must be some questions.
Until I see what you got.
Yeah.
Councillor Asif.
Yeah, I just have a question. So where it says minimum lot size, is this based on subdivision only, right? This, okay, it's not, and why I ask, because I have sewer in Western Shore, it wouldn't affect that, it's just a subdivision. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
this
you.
would only deal with if you're actually creating a new lot.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all I had.
Yeah. Probably. All right. Who else do we have? Councillor Church?
Thank you, good morning. Just the lot frontage from 6 meters to 15.5, that's quite a jump.
It is, yeah.
Did you think about, I don't know, would be going to 30 rather than 45? I know it's, why did you pick 45?
A standard residential driveway for the province, the maximum width that they'll give you is 10 meters. So
Okay.
if you have a 6-meter front lot, you can't get a maximum driveway
Okay,
in that spot.
okay, that's,
Meets dimensions.
okay, that's fair.
But it is, you're right, it is a big jump, but,
Oh, of course
and
it is.
we were, maybe not surprised, but when we dealt with that in the village too, it was like, okay, that is a change, but
Yeah.
if that's what they were going to go with, you know.
Yeah.
It's one of those, another one of these issues we deal with often with, you know, two different jurisdictions, you know, dealing with provincial jurisdiction in some areas and then us having jurisdiction in others, yeah.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-on to that, in the presentation you mentioned, you know, being able to service on like non-frontage lots with a 6-meter access easement. How would that work then if the proposed driveway wouldn't fit within the 6-meter easement?
So that would, through the access exemption lots?
Yeah.
So they'd be coming over a front lot, they'd be using that shared driveway somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, whether it's just an easement, there may not be a driveway.
Well, so if it's a problem, we could require 15.5
Yeah, I mean,
meter.
I don't think people are gonna be thrilled about that, but, you know, it's,
Yeah, because the goal with the, so right now, just for background, right now you can do an access exempt lot, and we don't require you to show any easement, legal access to that lot. We have had a couple cases though where, because the intention was, that is up to you and your lawyer to figure out how you're accessing that after you create that lot. We have had a couple instances where it's been missed at the legal side. So lots have been sold where that easement hasn't been in place. And then it's become a challenge because it's going over another lot. And that person is not necessarily as open to the previous person that sold it, putting it in. So so subdivisions always go over to the Department of Transportation. Doesn't matter how far back in the woods you're subdividing, it always goes back to them because they're always looking at how it's coming onto their roads. So they would also make comments for that. If they said, hey, there's a 6-meter easement and there's no other shared easy access, the existing driveway doesn't seem to be part of that easement, they could very easily come back and say, we have concerns about that access because of the fact that it's a 6-meter easement coming on to our road somewhere that's not an existing driveway that meets our standard.
all right. Well, in that event that would happen, you know, I would suppose that you wouldn't have to have the easement all the way back at 15 meters just at the road, so in theory, you could have a
Yeah, that's true, you could have a
widened
weird little
easement
wedge,
at-
exactly.
yeah, which would at least, because in an easement, it would then be a burden on whoever the property owner in
That's right.
front end, and if it's 50 feet wide, that's a lot.
It is, yeah.
So like having a swath through that piece of front land, 50 feet wide, where they can build a road anywhere they want, I think could be a big barrier for people that are proposing easements.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it's very limiting as well, because you can't put anything on that easement.
Yeah.
Right,
And that's not our intention to over encumber lots,
Yeah,
but we do want
so-
to make sure people have safe access.
yeah, I think there's a little detail around that, we're gonna wanna see that.
Okay.
Okay. I've got a few questions, but I wanna allow everybody else to speak. Okay, we're seeing more and more of these shared systems, shared septic systems, you know, I think it's a contentious issue. And it's not just in this municipality, it's all over, because of some regulatory changes that happened at the province in 2017. Is there any been thought about how, like if we're gonna be relying on subdivisions or developments that require shared systems, like some sort of maintenance, or like oftentimes like the regulator permits something, but there's not a lot of foresight on what exactly is gonna be required in the long term to keep them going, and everybody kind of dusts their hands off once they've been installed in accordance with the regulation. But the regulation's quite silent actually on maintenance, other than that you should maintain it. It's pretty vague.
From a public works standpoint, we're not really in favor of that, because then we're going in afterwards, looking at these little systems that really should be homeowner-based maintenance, not
Oh,
on the
I don't think we
public.
wanna do it, but
We don't wanna do it, and I think we're doing that now. If they put a system in, we have to accept it, but in
I
the
guess I'm
future,
wondering-
we're hoping not.
should we, if we're developers are relying on these shared systems to do their development, should we be requiring some sort of maintenance plan or something like that?
That's in there, so in the new sewer bylaw is updating the O&M, the training, all that's in the new sewer bylaw to make sure if we do take on a system.
No, not for us to take on it. If they're proposing a private sector development that they are servicing,
They're keeping,
like, under the new standard in environment, you can create lots and then
Yeah.
have a shared system off lot
yeah,
that services those lots. But then, so you have this big sort of mini plant that's not municipal,
yeah,
it's private sector, but there's no written plan, I think,
In
at
the
the
future.
subdivision stage that requires maintenance.
Yeah, I think we're actually proposing that you're either doing an onsite on that lot, or you're connecting to our sewer system, to move away from those private kind of sewer systems because of that issue. Because
Yeah.
they come in, if they fail, they're gonna come to the municipality and say, please take this over, because the developer's walked away, it's malfunctioning, and we have health concerns. And because we are caring, we will take that on, and we've done that in the past. And then we have non-compliant systems.
Yeah, we have examples within our municipality where there are it's like homeowners associations that actually control it, and that can be done successfully, but I think that I wouldn't rule out the opportunity for private sector maintenance. It just, I think that if that's gonna be part of if that allows development or more densification or whatever, I think that we would have to require some sort of like plan and how it is that what is the legal structure? Is it, if you're setting up a bare land condo, for example, to do something or whatever, and there should be something in place that defines how this is gonna be maintained by your people. Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a gap right now between what the province regulates and what we accept on the land use side.
So we actually looked at doing something similar, to your point of like requiring people to put something in place when they're doing subdivision for private roads, like a road association. We have a great program here. However, to register as a nonprofit association, you need at least 5 members. So if you're a company and you don't have enough, or you're one person, you don't have enough people to actually create that at the time of subdivision. You need more people in there. So that's a problem, and that's something we can't get around. That's under the Societies Act for the province.
To create a society, yeah.
Yeah, so to
I
create
think
that nonprofit.
there may be another option there, maybe we wanna think about it for a little bit.
Yeah.
I wrote a couple of other things down as you were going through. When subdivisions are created and we have this like offering of money or land in kind, Can you explain, because it's still foggy for me, exactly, do we accept any land, or like how, what's the criteria by which we, because if I were a developer, obviously I'm gonna give you guys the trash land that I don't want.
Yeah.
But
So
we don't want that.
Yeah, like Heather said.
Is this our opportunity to get rid of that option? or-
Yes.
Yes,
That's our
and that's,
intention.
that's the goal, yeah, because there, we do have a list of criteria in the subdivision bylaw, but it's vague enough and non-specific enough
Yeah.
that, to your point, it can be used in that way where, and that, to Heather's point, that we have accepted, basically.
Yeah, we get all the wetlands.
Mandated to it, yeah, or
That you can't do anything
rocky,
with.
It's true.
you know, steep pieces that just aren't suitable for recreation purposes. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that is the push and the intent behind this, is to switch the control to the municipality, to get to choose. So if there is a great piece of land that would be excellent, that fits into
Sure.
recreation's plans, great. Otherwise, the probably default
default
expectation
ideal would be
would be
cash.
cash, and then it goes into and just for everybody's sake, that goes into a fund for recreation purposes, so it's not just into a general.
Sure, we can go buy some ocean frontage or lake
That-
frontage
That's right,
somewhere.
exactly,
Yeah, that's fine, and that's what I was wondering about, because I think I see it commonly that, you know, we give the junk to
Yeah.
you folks.
Yeah.
Okay, I just take note that if you allow 3 lots of access exemption, that really could open up a lot of land, which I think it actually may be a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of land in behind other land that is good, and if you have some sort of way to get to it, you know, by legal means, but maybe not actually ownership, that's really good. I think that's a positive thing.
And that's an arbitrary number just based on the fact that between the 2 access exemptions we have now, if you are dual ownership at the time of the subdivision bylaw and you haven't used the pre-87, you more or less have 3 lots right now that you can create out of your lot, plus potentially your remainder. But it is arbitrary. If council has a different comfort number, more or less, you know, absolutely,
I think
there's
it's
nothing tying you to 3.
One of the strengths we have in our development regime here in the municipality is we allow private roads up to 6 lots, which you touched on here, and as I understand it, that road does not have to be designed. It has to be wide enough to accept a design.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it is the plan to continue on with that?
We're hoping to get more restricted with that, 'cause right now those 6 lots could be 6 lots, half a kilometer long.
Right,
So we have no designed road for that length. And if they've placed their houses and their septics and everything, then we don't really have that, because they don't keep that 66-foot road right away, so we can put a road in later. So it's there's one here in the village that does this, that now is at the 6. Now it's triggering that private road design, but I can't get a road through those first 6 houses.
so you would have a length restriction, maybe, that's the 400 meters?
That's the
400
400
meters,
meters,
Okay,
so.
that's fine, yeah, I think.
That and also bringing in
Some-
some
yeah.
base development level of that so that emergency vehicles can get down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Minimum-
there is
minimum
actually
Yeah.
a standard now for a private road.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is, with the team and the consultants, we talked a lot about what is the absolute minimum that it should be for essentially safety.
Safety.
Like
So
for
we
our
tried to
garbage
keep that.
vehicles, for school buses, for fire trucks.
So there'd still be a significant difference between building a private road and one that would be eligible for municipal.
And designing roads is expensive as
Yes.
well, like from an engineering standpoint, like, because you have to obviously survey on station and then do your cuts and fills all the way through,
Right.
as if you're gonna build it to a standard, and
Yeah.
so, do you think that for this 6-lot subdivision, that would require that level of investment, or is this gonna be, like, you basically, here's your standard, and you just have to ensure that the contractor builds it to some sort of decent,
Yeah,
and
it's-
then we do a review or something, or like, what do you
So
have in
it's,
your
it's
mind?
basically, I mean, I think in terms of the options, you'd have your access exempt option, and then you'd be into the private road standard, and then you're into the higher standard. So, that would be sort of your, if you don't wanna do any road, look at your access exempt options, but the 6 lot is really going away. It's being replaced by 400 meters at the lesser standard.
So if you design your road to like the lesser private road for 400 meters, you could get as many lots as you could get out of that.
Right.
You're not limited to 6. So if you're on sewer, you might be able to get 12 lots out of that. If you're on onsite, that might change, but you might be able to get 8 even. or something bigger. So to your question, the expectation would still be the same as today, that they provide how they're designing that road to our guidelines. So we do have the guidelines to the lesser standard that their engineer would have to do their design to, give that to us for review to make sure it is in compliance with what we have designed.
Well, I'm keenly interested to see what these different
Yeah.
tiers are gonna be and at what breaks, because I do know that like smaller, like first-time developers and things like that, they really, they like the fact
Yeah.
that they can push a small little, like, they get
Drive.
an excavation guy in there and he puts a road and they can do a few lots and that gives them a chance to sort of wet their feet on development and, not get into big boy development where you're doing road designs and like a real lot fabric and the whole thing. It's just sort of like, there's an opportunity there for like people just starting and,
There is, but we're finding issues with emergency, with those type of systems as
Yeah.
well, trying to get in
that-
later.
That balance, I think, is, it would be very interesting to see how you frame this up. You know, the 6 lots with your proposed 3-lot access exempt, it actually turns into 9 lots. Because at the end of that road, they're gonna say, okay, well, now we have no road, so now we're gonna just give you an easement over the road that we've built for the 6 lots, and that's now 9 lots, of
If,
course.
yeah, if that eligible.
Oh, yeah, every
Yep,
single
yep.
person will do that, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's okay, I
Yeah.
mean, just knowing that this is the rules of the game here, so.
Yeah, and again, there was, and absolutely, I mean, and when council sees the draft, by all means, further discussion on that. And there was a lot of internal discussion about, you know, there's existing private roads that fire trucks can't get up, and there appear to be, you know, they're wide, but it's a grade matter. So we looked, and the engineers from Design Point gave recommendations, so there is a different, you know, the grade for the lesser standard, it does allow it to go steeper, but there still is a cap, so that, you know, so it's that give and take. But absolutely, it's gonna be, we completely expected that would be probably one of the largest topics of discussion in here, because understanding.
It's probably one of the most significant changes to our current bylaw.
It'll be contentious, I think
Yeah.
when they rolled it out in the municipality, the district of Lunenburg, there was a number of meetings and it was quite exciting for people that were in that development space.
Yes.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes,
Yeah, so one of the reasons we brought this to council this morning was because we're close to a draft, but haven't sent that out yet to the public, wanted to come and do a temperature check with council on, here's the types of things we're doing. Now, subdivision bylaw, municipal specs, they're technical documents, right? They're like kind of hard to really read and understand what all of that means, especially when you put the different pieces together. So the next proposed step, I think, is to take the very early draft before council has seen it and take it out for feedback from the developers. But I'm wondering if council's comfortable with that, or do you want to see and dig into some of those more technical specs and see some of that stuff before it goes out to the public, because of what happened in other municipalities when a subdivision bylaw goes out with a new private road standard that says, you know, you may have to build a road that you never had to build before or something like that, that council's comfortable with what's going out as a draft, or are you okay with the draft going out, getting some feedback from the committee, making or from the
Industry.
right, the industry groups, and then coming back with some changes based on that feedback? Just wanted to kind of do a temperature check there. So,
Councilor Asif?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, if I was in the development business, I'd wanna know this, I mean, before we release it to anybody else, I mean, get their feedback, because it's gonna affect them more so than me.
yeah, I think the
Yeah.
intention was always to go out to the industry groups before it goes out to the general public, but the
Yeah.
question is, does it come to council before it goes to those industry groups, I think, is where I was back and forth. Is council comfortable with it going out to the industry groups before you've seen a full draft and just having this discussion today, or do you want to see the full draft come back to you before it goes out to the industry groups?
Well,
Councilor Bremner?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I think we need to hear the input from the industry and hear what they present and what they think, and then that way we hear the story from the users
Yeah.
and have a better understanding of what their thoughts are. I don't like the idea that we're telling them what we think, and then we have expertise, but some of us don't, so we have to be willing to listen to them. Thank you.
All right, I only had one last little thing, if it's okay. We mentioned that our current standard allows for 6 meters of frontage, but the province is requiring 15,
15 and a half.
15 and a half.
say. Why, like, when we do lot sizing, for example, now part of the subdivision process is going out for comment to transportation and environment and stuff like that, and in our subdivision bylaw, we actually just refer to the environment standards for lot areas. Why is it that if all we're really doing is mirroring the province's road frontage requirement, why don't we do the same thing with that and just say, you know, it has to have a positive comment from transportation rather than specifying the actual width?
So I'm gonna say there's two reasons. One, if it's a private road, we have a width as well that we're introducing into our municipal guidelines. That's always been our width, it's just never been clearly stated for driveway access and being able to functionally maintain that access and do ditching and stuff, which comes into the 15.5 meters. So we're now requiring people to design a road that could potentially in the future become one of our roads. We'd be hindering quite a bit of that, in my opinion, if we allow for a bunch of 6 meter lots coming through. On the technical side, what we get is, I'm gonna say this as diplomatically as possible, not to throw any particular developer or company under the bus, but it's an on-paper easement. And so they show it, they never develop it, and we have a lot of those, because we have no ability to force somebody to use the easement they've shown on their plan after the fact. We only have the ability to approve what is there. And that is becoming more and more common, where they're doing de facto roads because they're showing a 6 meter directly on, a 6 meter directly on, 6 meter directly on, 6 meter directly on to whatever road piece that they're allowed. And they're effectively creating a right of way that puts them over the 6 lot limit. It's a way for them to get around that. And it's becoming more and more common. So I would like to find a more equitable way for property owners and functionally for the municipality to, from my understanding, that 6 lot was put in because before that, we used to have a standard that was very, very minimal of like, please bury your stumps before you put your road in, and we would allow unlimited amount of lots off of that. So we do have some roads in the municipality that are super steep and all of that kind of stuff, and to the level that fire stations have said, we're not entirely sure we could get a truck up here in an emergency. I think the climate for that acceptance from the public has probably changed after the last several years and the events we've had. So it's kind of hoping to put our best foot forward without wanting to shut down private roads. Because I agree with Andre, absolutely, I agree with Councillor Vino. It is a unique piece that we do have, and it is a credit to council that you guys have had that. That ability to do private roads where an investor or a small property owner can get something going. Right? So we're not looking to lose that, but that is where we're looking to potentially adjust how we look at access exemption to take up some of those small investor, small property owners that would like to put their toe in the water, creating a couple lots without having to build a full engineered road of any standard. So that's the balance I'm hoping to get to.
And just one other comment on that, and this is probably mostly opinion-based, but I think, you know, it basically, to Heather's point, what we're trying to do is keep private roads, but modernize them and hit the issues that we feel should be responsible to ensure. And the other piece that's changed, I think, certainly since 2000 or 2008, is, I mean, as we all know, the cost of land has gone up. So if we're asking for a more expensive road, they're also getting more out of the lots that they're selling. I'm not saying that's a wash, but I think that is a reality too. So yes, we are asking for more, but most landowners would be selling an acre at a much higher value than in the past when with a lesser standard. So that won't make everybody happy, but I think that is, you know, a reality to consider along with the more important pieces that Heather spoke to, which is really about safety and ensuring that should that road ever come to us, it's in a state that we can
I've
readily
had
accept it.
comments since I've been here on why would you approve this if you can't make it safe later? Like, why can't we get a secondary access? Why is our road not wide enough to be safe to get in and out of? How did you approve that in the past? So by bringing these in, we'll make it safer for the future and to try to eliminate those issues as we go, rather than just, okay, we'll let you go, and then, well, we wanna make this a road. Well, I can't give you a road now. I can't give you a secondary access out. You're now, we have one design, it was 1.9 kilometers to a cul-de-sac. I said, I can't give you that. There's no way out. How do I get the person 1,800 meters down out when the fire's coming through? So we have to start working into our designs for development, but for the safety of the people that are gonna live there later.
Can't wait to see the draft.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. All right, well, I guess that's all the questions from the committee, so, Councillor Cooland has one.
Or have a comment. For example, 10 Beaches, you know, a nice little subdivision there and some settlement, no access for an emergency service road at all.
Yeah,
So
there's no secondary access.
Secondary access. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that would be negated in the future, that you would, any type of development in that scale would have a secondary access.
Hopefully, so they went through site plan, that is one big lot. So they did not require subdivision for that. So what would be dealt with here wouldn't solve that issue. But if somebody came forward tomorrow and said, hey, I want to do another 10 beaches, they go through a development agreement, and in that case, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have consideration of emergency access
The
in
next
there.
presentation, we'll get into that. So currently, it's a topic that absolutely gets discussed at development agreement. We don't actually have a hard policy on it. But that's, like I said, something we'll discuss going forward, which I think, and again, those are your two options usually for development are, you know, well, as of right, so through subdivision or site plan or development agreement. And so part of what we try to do is keep those balanced. We don't want one to be seen as the, you know, the easier way. We've certainly had some of those comments around with the Bearland condos that can be sometimes a less expensive way to develop. So by increasing some of our development agreement policies or some of the requirements that we're asking for, we don't want there to be a way to get around these rules, especially when it comes to safety and emergency access, those kind of things. So.
Now, I would agree with that comment, that last one you made about Bearland condos, because I see that increasingly becoming a common approach that developers are undertaking to, you know, we put a lot of time and effort in trying to come up with subdivision policy with access and lot sizing and all the things that are required to build a proper subdivision in a proper community. And then in terms of land use, Bearland condos, which is you're not actually like subdividing and creating little lots anymore. You're just creating this legal structure that everybody has ownership of the larger lot. And that's a big problem, because then suddenly the quality of the road, like what does it have to be? Well, who knows? It's whatever they want to do, or you know, the sewage management, all of the different things, like it all goes out the window unless we start to put some sort of framework around that. I think I'm looking forward to hearing more in the next presentation, but I see that as a huge loophole right now, not just here, but in other jurisdictions as well. And because people generally, I've noticed a trend because of high costs of construction, that people are trying to be creative in how they build. You know, there's not as many family homes being built. So you see more accessory dwelling units, like another dwelling unit on a single lot, so they can save some money, or multi-unit buildings and things like this. This is what we're seeing, a shift and a trend. And in terms of land development, using these Bearland condos are becoming a tool that developers are using to try to shave costs, but it undermines everything that we just talked about in this part of the presentation. And I think we should be, well, we're going to talk about it soon, but I think closing those loopholes, I think, are important, because, you know, we're putting them in place for a reason, and just having a way around it. And the ordinary person that's just going to buy a house, they don't understand. They're not thinking about accesses and emergency vehicles and all of the different things that we put into these discussions. So, all right.
Thank you.
So we're going out to the industry next then?
Oh boy.
Great.
Okay. So we have that tentatively for July 8th then?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right? The options, get the drafts out to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.
So the next
Stick around.
discussion is regulation options for large-scale rural development. And I just want to point out how impressive Councillor Ace's shirt is. Very, very, you feel like you're in holiday mode here.
Take my jacket off to show everyone.
You're looking very handsome today.
I can get you one.
Okay.
Gareth, you want one?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so this is, again, a discussion bringing back in relation to a request from council following a number of recent development proposals, as we just kind of alluded to, in particular around some that have done through Bearland Condo. And so the council asked us to take a look at some form of, some regulations to potentially address some of these concerns we've seen around large-scale rural residential developments primarily. So some ideas that were, thrown out was, should there be a density limit, a number of units per acre, something to that effect? Should we look at limiting on-site septic systems, similar to some of the discussion we just had? And sort of how does large-scale rural development fit in with existing character? That's been another piece that we've been hearing about. So those were some of the sort of preliminary things. So just to take a quick step back, and I try to make a habit of doing this every once in a while, just a quick review of our sort of history here in municipality. So zoning began in the village in 1976, and then it gradually expanded outward from the village boundary to the sort of the village periphery area, and then to, over time. In the early 2000s, we split into a municipal plan and a village plan, which we've continued. And when we did our municipal plan review 2019 or 2020, when we got our draft approved, we heard clearly that there was a desire in rural areas to have light to no zoning control, depending on who you asked. And so this was respected. Council went along with that through the continuation of the general basic zone, which implemented a very base level of regulation primarily aimed at larger developments, whether it be residential, commercial, or industrial, requiring a development agreement or a site plan approval process. However, since that plan has been adopted, and this is, a lot has changed in those 6 or 7 years, across the spectrum. We've been hearing more concerns around some of these larger rural residential developments and the lack of regulation. And I think in particular, to Councillor Vino's point, around particularly things that have been done as a Bearland condo or a land lease style, where some of our regulations for road standards and things like that are able to be worked around by going through a development agreement. Next slide, please. So everyone's probably familiar with this sort of a carrot and a stick approach towards trying to get something that you want. So a carrot is generally encouraging something, and a stick is more of a punishment or a no, let's say.
Desistant.
A deterrent.
A deterrent, that's a great way to put it. So last year, council approved the growth strategy. And this obviously, as you'll recall, focused on our existing hamlet zones as well as the newly proposed hamlet area around the village periphery, which hasn't yet come to fruition, but will be included in the 2030 plan review. And the choice at that time was to try to incentivize growth and development in our hamlet areas. And basically that would be through the availability of municipal services, AT infrastructure, sidewalks, and similar types of things that you would expect to see in those hamlet zones. So that's the carrot, that's the incentive, that's come here, this is why it's good to develop here, because of all these things that you have access to that you may not in other areas. And at that time, I think, given where we were, that felt like a good level to start at. We had a few discussions about, do we want to start to also implement the stick, which would be to limit or more tightly control development in rural areas. Therefore, we're making it easier in these areas, and we're making it in some way more difficult or more regulatory in the rural areas. So that would the theory being that would help push growth from the other end into our growth centers. Next slide. So this is, we're all kind of setting the stage here. So this follows along what I was saying here. So people obviously generally act in their own interest and will typically follow the path that appears to be the easiest, the cheapest, or has fewest barriers. Whether this applies widely, whether we're talking about development or, you know, just general day-to-day life. And so the discussion here is about starting to nudge development in a desired direction. So we've made, ideally, we've incentivized development in our hamlet zones. But in order to sort of speed this up, one option would be to start to make alternate paths less attractive compared to development. And again, I think we're talking about larger developments here. So we have the incentives in place, and those are continuing to work through like the Chester Basin sewer expansion and all of the other capital projects that we have going. So the question is whether or not disincentivizing the easy route in rural areas, particularly as we've been talking about through these sort of land lease communities, would be something we want to consider at this point. Next slide. So just a quick review of our current zoning. So I think today, for the most part, we're going to want to focus the discussion on 3 zones, which is the general basic, the mixed use, and the settlement residential 2 zones. Those zones all allow the same types of residential development through the same processes that are up on the screen here. So 1 to 4 lots by development permit, 5 to 11 through site plan approval, and 12 plus by development agreement. I have the zoning map there, but I don't even know that we need to go to it. The point of going to that is that the vast majority of our municipality falls in these 3 zones. I mean, general basic alone is by far the largest, but mixed use is also very large, and settlement residential 2 starts to pop up as probably the 3rd most common zone. So the point of that is that we're talking about a large part of the municipality, and again, our more rural areas. So I also thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about sort of visualizing density when we're talking about density limits. So I did a little bit of internet research and grabbed a couple examples to try to show. Now, obviously, a lot of these things are more urban based. They're talking about cities, but I do have some examples in a second. Emily, I'll get you to click on that density examples link, but just not right yet. So the one on the left here, pretty straightforward. It's showing what 75 units looks like in a variety. So same amount of land area, same number of units, but just showing you how different styles of building can, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. You know, in the top one, in the apartment tower, there's a lot of green space. There's a lot of, a lot of that lot is not going to be built up. It could be good for, water recharge and those kind of things. But a different style of living for the people that live in that building than in the other 2 examples, let alone, one that we don't have here would be, just 75 single unit dwellings just scattered right across there. And then the image on the right is a little bit less different, but basically what we're talking about here is, there's a difference between overcrowding and density, and I think sometimes when in our rural areas, we have a traditional sort of character and density, and so some of these things could be seen as, oh, you're going to pack all these people in here, it'll be a terrible environment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. There is a difference between overcrowding and density. Density is, again, ensuring that there's enough space for people. But what we're talking about today is more what level of density feels appropriate in our rural areas. So if you don't mind clicking on that, hopefully this will work. And then just scroll down. So this is an article. We're not going to read the article. Just keep scrolling. But what you'll see here is there's some examples as we get into them. There we go. Sorry, keep going. Yeah. A little bit, there we go, perfect. So what I like about this is it shows you a street view image, and then it shows you the top-down image. And just scroll up just a tiny bit to see the number, sorry, up. So what you're seeing here represents four dwelling units per acre. I just wanted to start to get some visualizations into what this looks like. So 4 dwelling units per acre. So you can see it on the, on the bottom from the plan view. You know, everybody has a backyard, these are all fenced in this case, and you can see what that looks like from the street view. For our rural areas, that would be fairly dense. That's, you know, that's more, that would be like a subdivision street that was done and built up. But that's not what we typically see on our highway strip development. We've got larger lots with more space between houses. Yeah, just keep scrolling down, there's a few more examples. So this is 5.3 dwelling units per acre. Obviously, the design of the houses can give a very different streetscape, but still close together. And again, when you look at the top-down view there, you know, everybody's got a yard, but they don't have large side yards. And just go down a little bit further. So 5.9, so we're just getting slightly more and more here. And again, you can see, in this case, the homes are kind of stacked, which is not something that's typical of our area. There's a whole bunch more examples, and it gets up into like really high densities and multi-units, which isn't as applicable for us. But I just wanted to give an idea of what even 4 units per acre looks like in sort of a standard subdivision. So if we can go back to the slides now, that was great, thank you. Perfect, okay, and next slide, yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna get into some, I've called these concepts. You could think of them as options, and at the end of the options, there is an option to create your own. So you don't have to go with any of these. And you can also, you know, pick one of these and add or subtract as you like. So I would say concept 1 is generally the staff recommended option, but at this point, we're still having a very early discussion. So all of these are up for debate. So as I mentioned, this would apply to general basic mixed use and SR2. 1 to 4 units by permit would stay the same. I would again make the suggestion that we consider permits in the general basic zone to standardize this. I know we keep talking about coastal coming, but we're going to have an additional overlay like the lakefront overlay, which will require permits in general basic anyway. So we're getting to a point where there's going to be a whole bunch of areas in general basic where you do need permits, and then some areas where you don't. So I think for consistency, we're getting to that point. But this could be done leaving general basic just as it is. I just want to make that point too. 5 to 9 units by site plan approval. So just for context, that would be currently 5 to 11 by site plan approval. So we're taking it down from 11 to 9 here. Again, this is a suggestion which you can take or leave, which we have discussed before. Under this, I would suggest that we consider manufactured and modular homes the same. If you recall, Kim Lance came in to discuss this with council. And the gist of that is if a home comes as one piece and is dropped on a lot, it's treated differently than if it comes in 2 pieces or 3 pieces or is built on site from the ground up. And I can get more into why I think that makes sense with this option, but for now, I'll just leave that as a suggestion. Implementing a minimum lot area, I would suggest 0.2 hectares, which is about half an acre. That's pretty standard, and of course it would be larger as required by Nova Scotia Environment for an on-site system. But that would again standardize this for us so that it would avoid that Heather alluded to earlier. There have been cases where holding tanks have been approved as a septic system, and so this would would prevent small lots from being created. And then this is where really kind of the rubber hits the road here on the big change. Currently, if you go above 11, it's 11 or 12 plus by development agreement. The change here would be to say anything above 9 units requires a new zone. So you're no longer in general basic mixed use SR2. You need to apply to rezone to our neighborhood comprehensive development district, which some of you may recall, it was a zone we introduced a number of years ago and have applied at the Aspatagan Ridge development. It does remain available to be used, but it hasn't really come up for a lot of discussion since then. In short, it is a zone, as it stands currently, it requires a development agreement for everything. And I'll get into this here. What I would suggest is that we revise that zone as well. But basically, the intent of this change would be to say, if you're, and again, this is all on a lot, a single lot, so subdivision is separate, like we talked about earlier, but this means if you're going beyond 9 units on a single lot, you have to first apply for the rezone, and that's its own planning process. We'll talk about the policies that are in there to get NCDD zone. And then after that, it would either be a development agreement or potentially an as-of-right development. But the rezone process would put the community on alert that a large development is proposed. So I think that would help in a way to address, like, and that would be known, you know, as soon as that application came in, that's known that this is proposed to be a large development. So I think that puts it on everybody's radar a little bit sooner. And it allows council, particularly as we get into what specific policies we add and or change, to have a lot more input at that rezoning point so if it was approved, the rezoning was approved, the expectation from everybody should be a large development is going to go here. But it would put that rezoning first, and again, depending on the policies that we put in there, give council more leeway to say, this is not an appropriate site for a large rural development, so we're going to turn down the rezoning before you even get to either a development agreement or
Well, this is, if I can just jump in for a second, if I'm honest, I think this is one of our council's weaknesses, is we're not sure sometimes when it's appropriate to say no.
Yes. Yep.
And, you know, if we're gonna have such a, it's not a bad proposal, but if you're gonna have a proposal such as this, then there has to be some sort of, like, for example, character.
Yes.
Is one that we often cite as something that's important for communities. But we have, it's also one of those things that's, it's very difficult to measure.
Yes.
What's appropriate character and what's not. And sometimes we may feel like something doesn't really fit very well in, but we're concerned that if we reject on that basis, that we would not withstand a challenge. And so I guess we need to, if we're gonna go down that road of being able to say no, that this is not appropriate for an area, then we need to give ourselves some tools to actually say no.
Agreed.
And I would be very much looking forward to hearing from staff on what they would recommend as giving us some actual weapons to use in our defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have the specifics, but I do have some ideas. So and I think actually maybe just on the next slide. So just to finish this piece here. So the intent would be rezone to neighborhood comprehensive development district. And then, like I said here, review and increase, these would be the tools you're speaking of, the policies for the NCDD zone to allow council that, looking at large scale in the context of the surrounding area, does this fit, things like character. One idea, and this again, there's multiple pieces in here that are optional, and so if council chooses one of these, when this comes back, we'll still have these as optional. One idea that we had was if the site was proposed to be within 5 kilometers of one of our growth centers, we could, once it was rezoned to NCDD, the development could go through conditional as of right, which means there might be provisions in the bylaw, additional provisions that they have to meet, but it would be an as of right development. Whereas if it was further than 5 kilometers from a hamlet zone, so basically well outside of the area that we've identified as our priority growth centers, it would still require a development agreement, which still gives that extra level of community input, and ultimately another council vote. So if we go to the next slide, I'm hopefully gonna touch on some of the tools here. So if this was the selected option, I would definitely recommend that we review the NCDD zone policies. These are just some ideas. I'm happy to take any others, and if this was the selected option, may add some to this. But and some of these come from recent discussions and proposals that council has been dealing with, and I think in some cases struggling with how far to go in terms of asking. But I think if we add this in policy clearly from the outset, if you're applying for this zone, expect that we're going to ask for a full traffic study for the cumulative effects, even if your development is only a small part of the traffic on this road network. Expect that we want to see that. Whereas currently, that's a harder ask, because if someone provides us a traffic impact statement and the provincial road authority signs off on the access points and says it's no problem, it's a bit harder for us to say, we don't feel that's appropriate. But if we clearly outline that in policy that, and that, I think we're in a stronger place there to say, first off, ask for it, and then secondly, evaluate it. And that could be a potential reason to turn it down if the study shows that that would create issues with the road network. To your point, Councilor Vino, architectural or design controls that ensure structures are appropriate for their location, while avoiding being overly restrictive. That is a tough one, and it will all come down to the details in what we put in. But I know we've heard things like not having the same home built 50 times. That would be very easy to add in some policies to require variety. Depending on how far we want to go with this, we could ask for something from a qualified, like an architect, to say that they've looked at the surrounding community and their designs are in keeping with that. Like, so I realize at this point we don't have that level
The
of
other
detail.
thing we
Yeah.
could do is basic massing, right? So
Yes.
that you don't
Yeah.
end up with just a big box, right?
Right.
That the big box is broken up with some sort
Yep.
of architectural elements or.
Exactly.
So pretty basic stuff
Yeah.
without getting into architectural controls that say you have to use vinyl siding or
Right.
you have to use this color, or whatever it
Right.
might be that people
Yeah.
think of when they think of architectural controls.
Yeah.
Those basic massing requirements
Yeah.
sometimes go a long way as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, absolutely, for the larger structures. But I think there is, and it is tricky, but I think there is a desire for something for the single units too. But again, not trying to get into specific form, but more something to ensure it's a fit. But we also don't want to completely close ourselves off from new ideas too. So that's, like I said, that's where the balance comes in. Similar, we've talked about this with subdivision. There would just be a hard requirement that you have a secondary approved access if you were going to be doing an NCDD zone project. Potentially requirements for additional review by NSE. So that's come up again with these lots that are all, or developments all done in one lot, and they have a number, if it's not a shared system, but it's a number of on-site septic systems and sort of the cumulative effect of that. So currently, again, we don't have, we can ask NSE for comment, but we don't have specific policies, so we could add something in there to either require a report or additional comments to ensure that again, there's kind of a theme here, which is looking at the bigger picture and how this site and the proposed development would fit into the larger context, whereas our current policies are more focused on the site specifically and not so much on the surrounding community. And I do think we need to add good policy to explain why we're doing that, but I think we have a strong case based on, like I said, the types of development and the kinds of conversations that we've been having with the public. And finally here, so it would just, again, be just written in, full level 1 groundwater study prior to getting your rezone, and then a level 2 study prior to getting your permits, whether that was through development agreement or development permit. So that's kind of the concept 1, so slightly reduce.
That's the one you're recommending.
That's the one I'm recommending. And this is just a quick example of how that would work. So in general basic mixed use or SR2, the applicant comes in and they say, I want to do more than 10 on the lot. First step, successfully rezoned to NCDD with those new strengthened policies saying full traffic study, this kind of thing. And as part of your rezone, you have to state what your intended use is. So we would be asking, what is the development that you're proposing? If the site was within 5 kilometers of an existing hamlet zone, the thought is that we could have a series of conditions that would still ensure some of those basics, but then it would be an as of right, so just through the development officer. This is again, a piece of the carrot to say if you locate within or close to our hamlet zones, you have you have an easier path to approval. If you're more than 5 kilometers away from our growth centers, I think we have a strong case to say we want to take a closer look at that and see if it fits in. And the policies there the intent will be that they will allow council to do a thorough review and evaluation of whether that is where we want large scale development. So that's kind of concept 1. I don't want to take too long, but I do have a few other options here just from some of the things that were discussed. So concept 2, this would be kind of just a bit less overall change, primarily relying on a density limit. The trouble here is what limit do we set? And that's why I showed those examples earlier. Our previous bylaw, our previous municipal land use bylaw did have,
Garth.
oh,
I
sorry.
think Councillor Connors wanted to jump in there.
Sure.
Sorry, yeah, no, and I just kind of wanted to, before we moved on to concept two, and I know I'll get my fingers slapped here for jumping ahead on the slides, but when I'm jumping ahead to next steps, and I'm thinking public participation, and I'm already squirming in my seat a little bit, I'll be honest, because this is big, I believe, in my opinion.
Yep.
It's big for general basic, obviously, mixed use and SR2. Big, I think it's big. And I'm all about making sure that we go out to the public, because I have great pride in the exercise that we went through with the municipal planning strategy the last time around, with the extent of the public meetings, whether people chose to turn out or not, I get that. And I know this is, anything or over 9 units, so we're not talking maybe the regular
Right.
individual on the street, but I still think that I'm a little nervous around, and I just want council to think about it as we proceed through the next steps and get to the next get to the next step slide, and we talk about the public information meeting. It's a singular. I'm interested in having those public information sessions, not just a singular one, but more than one, because this is big for general basic mixed use.
Yeah.
Just to say, because I want to make sure we're, for me, that we're doing this right, and I think we are absolutely, and I have high respect with everything that you've presented, as, again, and positioning council, making decisions and the right decisions. So I just was getting a little nervous, and I just wanted to say that, but again, I know I'm getting ahead, and I'm not supposed to do that, but I'm squirming in my seat, I couldn't help it.
Public's not gonna like that necessarily.
Well,
Some will.
I think some will, because we've been here, I mean, think of all the people that have told you they don't like these large developments we've seen lately. There's a lot of people that should come out in strong support of this, I hope. It may be more on the development community side that you feel some pushback, because it is, increasing regulatory requirements. But absolutely, and more than happy to have a discussion about where we go next. So, so concept two, like I said, would primarily rely on a density cap or density limit. The old bylaw did have one of 12 units per hectare, which equates to 5 per acre. So we saw a slide there around 5 per acre, which looked like your subdivision street. And just as an example, East River Village, which is up for public hearing this evening, is about 0.55 units per acre, and that has been commented on as being high density or too high density. So I struggled with what number we would apply, unless we did it on some sort of a calculation based on the surrounding density or something like that, which is gonna get pretty complicated. But it is an option. We did have it before. If we want to say, yes, we have a density limit, we can absolutely put it in there. But I think if it went back in at 5, it wouldn't be very impactful on the types of developments that we've seen. It wouldn't have any impact on any of the ones that we've seen lately that we have had
It'd be
feedback
more
on.
density than what some of the current ones
Right.
are.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
If I can jump in, I think one of the issues of when we think about density is we often refer it to the density on the PID. But for example, should you have a PID that is 75% comprised of wetland and is essentially undevelopable, and then the developer wishes to put a great number of dwelling units on the remaining portion of the usable lands, yes, in theory, for the PID, which is mostly useless.
Right.
It's very low density. But of the usable land, if we look at usable land, it actually changes the calculation significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It becomes very, very dense.
Right.
And so the artificial construct that we're using to calculate density is based on a legal framework of the lot.
A lot. Right.
Not the actual developable land. If you look at developable land instead, then I think you'll have something that will probably mirror the public's concerns, because when you have just a little island of dry land and you put all the houses there, that is very jarring.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how we would evaluate usable land, like we'd have to define
I
it,
think you could take the
And
provincial wetlands maps, for example, and
just subtract.
subtract that from the actual PID. That would be probably a first stab at it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that would be straightforward enough. The other piece of that, and it's an interesting piece, and there's obviously two opinions on it.
You could also
Some-
take our water courses with our setbacks that are required, because that's also
Sure,
non-usable
right.
land, because
Yep.
we have a 50-foot setback requirement from all provincially mapped wetlands.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
water
we
courses.
could, that would be an easy calculation to just subtract out wetlands and the setbacks, and wetlands, water courses, and setbacks around them. It's interesting, in some areas, they actually encourage that type of density. It's called conservation subdivision or conservation design, where you do intentionally cluster development on a lot and then leave the majority as natural, for wildlife and biodiversity purposes. But I understand what you're saying too, those are two different sides to it. So if we want to, I think that would actually be very helpful if we are gonna go down the route of a density cap, to have something along those lines of, this is how we calculate the lot area. It's not just the lot area, to come up with something closer to usable land. Absolutely.
I think sometimes too, what's jarring for people is the number. So you can have a very large lot of, say, 100 acres, and at 0.5 units per acre, you're at 200 units. And that's a big number for a community to absorb sometimes. And so they say it's too much density, but if you look at those pictures, some of those pictures that we saw were 4 units per acre. We're talking half a unit per acre. And so it's the number of
Yes.
housing units that translates to people being fearful of the density,
Right.
as opposed to the actual density number, which is 0.5, and we saw a 4 units that everybody said, oh, that looks like a normal subdivision, right? So 0.5 would look like potentially a lot less than that, so.
So that's where, at least going back to the first concept, I think, to Tara's point, I think it is more about the number of units, like the size of the development, and putting either tighter controls or potentially caps on the size of the number of units.
I would say that when we're doing conventional subdivisions, which are oftentimes planned to be many phases and many units, we don't see as many, I haven't heard as many complaints from the public about conventional subdivisions, which have, design roads and all
Yeah.
of the provisions that we have, the aforementioned
Yeah.
provisions. So, I think it's more nuanced than just looking at the number of units. I
Yeah.
think that there is something about conventional subdivisions that allows the rarefication of development that is acceptable in rural areas. Whereas when you have one PID or whatever, and it's a different arrangement, that the clustering of these dwelling units, I think somehow is bothersome to people.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Yeah. So that basically, we pretty much covered this. Along with that, we'd still recommend implementing a minimum lot size. Concept 3, not that dissimilar from 1, except this would be just less change overall. This would be leave it as 1 to 4 by permit, 5 to 11 by site plan, remove 12 plus, and just rezone to the NCDD zone as it is today, but that's without beefing up the criteria. So this would be like an impediment, or it would slow down these projects, but it wouldn't address all of the details that we've been talking about today. So if more of a Band-Aid to get to plan review maybe, than like a truly digging into it. Yeah, go to the next one. Concept 4, again, this is kind of less change to the overall documents, would be to maintain the current number of units in the zones, but instead of getting into the NCDD zone and the policies for rezoning to NCDD, we could go back to our development agreement policies and instead look at things like we've been talking about, traffic impacts beyond the bounds of the development, more regulation on the layout of units. So that would be, this is a similar approach, except just still doing it through DA rather than requiring a rezone first, I guess. And then, as I said, concept 5 would be, if you heard a few things you like and you want to mash those together into its own option, be more than happy to do that. I feel like I'm running a little long here. So I had some connections to the growth strategy. I'm not going to go through all of those, but essentially most of these options would, particularly I think concept 1 would support the work in the growth strategy. Like we said, some of these would be adding a bit of the stick to the already provided carrot that we have in there. Yeah, so we can keep going. Yeah. And, yeah, okay, perfect. So next steps. So, yeah, like I said, this is always optional where we go from here. If, you know, if council today would like to pick one of those concept options, I can, or a couple, two of them, or make up your own, I can, work to bring some, to put those into draft amendments, and those would be brought, my proposal would be, we bring that back to council for direction to proceed, so for that first meeting, but you'll actually see what we're proposing at that point. And then from there, we would undertake public participation at a minimum, what's listed there, but certainly we could add more meetings through the general basic zone. So, yeah, happy to have any other questions or.
Councillor Coolin.
No, thank you. I'm for your concept one, your recommended concept. I'm supporting Garth and his decision.
Councillor Bremner.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, through you to our presenter. I also like concept one. I do have a couple of comments, though. I notice we talk about safety, and we talk about development, and we talk about, access and egress, but we don't talk about any on-site water supply for an emergency. And if I remember right, when we talk about Tantallon, there are two issues where lack of water on the site, potentially, and egress to get people out.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's somewhere we can have for the bigger developments, maybe a cistern system or some kind of a water source, because you can get the apparatus there now.
Right.
But then you gotta leave to go get water.
Right.
And you're losing, and if we're condensing more items or locations together, then I think we need to look at that potential. And I just didn't see anything there. Maybe I overmissed it, but.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. We can, that we have something to that effect in our current policies, but definitely we can include that.
I think right now we look for comments from,
Yes, from the fire
the
department.
fire department, the fire chief.
Yeah.
You could put a little bit more structure around that
Exactly.
perhaps
Yeah.
of, whether it's a cistern or a dry hydrant or something like that, that there's.
And we have had, and that, yeah, I think, but maybe something to the effect of at the, at the chief's discretion or something like that, because we've had cases where, where it's, the department has preferred a pond based on the pumping equipment that they have.
Yep.
And we've had other cases where they've said, the ocean's right there, don't bother. So I think having some flexibility, but at the chief or the department's discretion would definitely be.
I'd be fine with that. I think that's an important element that I just didn't see.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Oh, yeah, concept one.
I have a few comments.
Sure.
As expected, probably. I'm just gonna touch on a few. I've got four. And this is fundamental in all our land use bylaw, but I want to take this opportunity to touch on it. Dwelling units are not all the same. So when we think about a dwelling unit, a 5-bedroom home and a 1-bedroom apartment, I think under our current framework are treated the same.
Yep.
So should a person decide to build an apartment building with 4 1-bedroom apartments that are gonna house single people or maybe a couple, we're dealing with those in the same fashion as if we were gonna build 4 individual single-family homes
Right.
that'll house a family. I feel like we need to address that in some way with our policy, because obviously the impact of one small building, each without a little apartment, is not the same as spreading out all these single-family homes. I think it's a big problem right now for certain types of development, because they are all treated the same, and I'd like somehow to address that. If, I don't know if there's a way of making provision where we say something like that, that a single-family home, or a dwelling unit assumes 3 bedrooms or something like that, so if you're gonna do multiple 1-bedrooms, then you can combine those to make an equivalent dwelling
Okay.
unit
Yeah,
or something
some
like
sort of
that
that.
for, there might be an opportunity, so it encourages those developers that are making small units for that particular
Right.
demographic that needs that housing. It allows them the opportunity to do it,
Right.
okay? I think we touched on manufactured versus modular, and we had a member from the public come in and speak to us a couple of weeks ago about that. And I think the issue that we've found, I don't think anybody really cares too much about how it's manufactured or how it's delivered to the site. I think the public's concern is always to do with the form and repetition. So nobody wants a development that's gonna look like a hot dog roller at the grocery store, or the gas station or whatever, where you have just rows of dwelling units. It's very jarring. But in some way, if we can in our policy reward developers that are thoughtfully placing the units in a way that disrupts that
Yeah.
repetitive development, I think then that there'll be a lessened concern from the public.
About the, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how to build that in, but I feel like that needs to somehow
Yep.
be added. Secondary access, which was touched on by Councillor Bremner. You know, I think, I'm not sure what specifications we have on that secondary access. Like, when we have a development proposed and the secondary access comes out and it's 200 feet down the road from the primary access, I'm not sure how effective as an alternate emergency access that really is, and checks a box perhaps, but is it really a secondary access, or is it just one on paper? I would question the wisdom of just saying a secondary access must be required and then putting some sort
Putting
of
some standards.
specification on how far the two accesses have to be from one
Sure.
another,
Yep,
okay?
yep.
I feel like that's a hole right now that we're being exploited.
Currently, we don't even have a policy on secondary access, so when we get one, we're happy to have it. But yes, absolutely, this, you're right, to have it, once we have it in standard, I think you're absolutely right, we should have some criteria around.
And finally, for the last, say, 7 or 8 years, we've put a lot of work into protections for lakes and water bodies. You know, we have setback requirements, vegetative buffers, all these things. And large-scale developments pose an additional threat to water bodies that other jurisdictions have dealt with by requiring phosphorus studies. And I feel like if you're going to allow large-scale developments above a certain number of units, then a phosphorus study may have to be required, because phosphorus is what contributes, or is the main contribution for algae blooms, which is, you know, a big issue. And so you can look to HRM and around Fall River, and you can find that as requirements in those jurisdictions. And I think that if we're really serious about protecting our lake systems, we may want to look at that as well.
Yep. Yeah, great. No, thank you, those are all good suggestions that I can definitely have a look at, work into. Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Great, all right.
I think that probably this committee would like to have a little break.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with me, I know that was a lot.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Last topic is our solid waste department and our business plan for the landfill. Mr. Quinn, take it away. Is your mic on? There you go.
All right, thank you, through Deputy Warren to the rest of council. So this is sort of our first walkthrough of a formal, or getting towards a formalized business plan for the landfill and just solid waste department in general, so.
Great.
we can- Next slide. So generally, just to give a short overview of where we're at with that, so you have as a bit of a reference. So this is sort of structure based on CBDC's business plan template that they have out there. So if you're wondering where some of the format comes from, that's where we're sort of adapting from that. And there's also just a highlight that there is certain sensitive information that isn't in this public-facing version of this, that if there's any sort of questions that touch on that, we can suggest we go in camera to get into that. But
We'll just plan for that
Yeah.
at the end. Yeah.
Yep. So quickly, just sort of following the format, so there's a bit of the department overview. So our sort of vision, as we've articulated at this point, is basically just environmentally sustainable and fiscally responsible waste management solutions through our regional partnerships and establishing ourselves as a leader of innovation and best practices within the province. So that's sort of that larger message, and then basically drilling down to that, just sort of, so in terms of the specific objectives, it's basically just to build a strong business-oriented culture of continuous improvement to support council's financial and strategic objectives that relate to our department. So that's sort of in sort of three main buckets. So basically, obviously, people, we want to be an employer of choice, so we attract quality staff and retain them. Keep strengthening our existing relationships and to pursue new business and partnership opportunities there, and deliver high-quality customer experience when they're at the site or what they see at the curbside. In terms of places, just continue extending and see where we can reasonably extend the landfill's lifespan, promote a pride of place for both the public and also staff, and just where there's areas to expand services at the landfill and other locations that they make sense to do so. In terms of process, it's just, again, continuous improvement for safety and operational plans, and try to be a little bit more proactive in terms of our community engagement. So in terms of services that we're currently providing, four main areas, so basically disposal services, obviously curbside collection, recycling in support of those programs, education components, so you'll see some of that will be starting at the end of this week in that, and also just with that, we've been coordinating with Region 6 and other areas, so just to try to keep enhancing the programs that are there now, and that, and also, if need to, the last resort is obviously enforcement, just to deal with those who are persistent, so. With that, so in terms of the goals, we'll get into a little bit more specifics, but generally speaking, the goals we're trying to identify basically focus on optimizing operations to establish that, and to establish the strategic and operational framework to meet the growing demands in a sustainable and cost-effective manner. So the waste management industry is continually evolving. That creates opportunities, but also creates challenges that we have to just keep adapting to meet those. And then just the general demand for Kaiser Metal to keep accepting a broader range of materials across varying waste streams, and that's ever evolving and increasing as programs and everything else changes over time. So with that, some more of the more ongoing types of goals, just continually building on the partnerships, again, maintaining ongoing engagement with our customers, suppliers, and stakeholders to evaluate and improve services where it makes sense to, and identify advanced partnerships and find areas to collaborate to enhance service delivery. Also, to deliver value for obviously our taxpayers. So I think one of the items discussed is to look to establish a target dividend amount and quantify broader financial, non-financial benefits to ratepayers for all the services. And just to conduct regular reviews of area rates, tipping fees, contract pricing as well, and assess opportunities where we can repurpose materials for value-added uses, either within the site or for other markets, or both. And then obviously managing the lifespan of Kaiser Meadow itself, so just continue working on airspace modeling for that, and try to do, I'll say, real time, so fairly regular check-ins to make sure that's what we're seeing operationally is lining up with what we've projected within the models, and just and balance those two items out. Next slide, please. Sort of in the more shorter term, sort of get more into the formal asset management planning side, so make sure that we develop those plans to get aligned with what our internal policies and best practices are. So again, you sort of saw some of that reflected in the current capital investment programming, try to get more of that more formalized and just sort of better projection of what we're seeing in terms of future projects and initiatives. So again, touching on extending the site's lifespan, which was, again, talking about the capital improvement plan. One of those ones is to seek approval for a vertical expansion of the existing disposal area. We may also look at the C&D side disposal area as well as we're going. Also just continuing just to look at our organizational setup within the department, just make sure we're being effective in what we're delivering in terms of services, also with our regulatory and contractual obligations in that regard. And may look at a business case for additional depots for our plastics and paper products, because right now we have one drop-off location within the entire municipality, so I suspect there's going to be a need to add more as we go along, just for the sake of our residents, so they have more options in that. So, and just keep enhancing our internal processes, so just continually going through our internal plans, procedures, and that, just to make sure those are up to date. We're going through a process of looking at our curbside auditing program. That's sort of part of an educational more than that. Also working with our procurement officer to formalize our own internal practices, and doing just an annual review of our working plans and processes. And also just trying to keep working on a training program that aligns with Construction Safety Association core requirements, so their programming, which we're already a participant in, so just to keep going with ours and building a little bit more solid waste specific toolbox with that. And obviously mentioned the improved communications and outreach, so you've seen the outreach plan, sort of the first go around with that. We're going to keep working on updating our social media and website content, make sure those are up to date. And we're, particularly with Emily, she's leading a lot of this, and a lot of collaboration with Region 6 and also our municipal service representative, to make sure our communications are all aligning and consistent in that. And there's one we are going to look at. There was a recent SWANA conference that we're going to look at the potential feasibility that there was a mobile collection service for seniors and mobility challenged residents. That there's one Fundy region, New Brunswick, that actually had a very interesting business model. So we may look at that, and there's a potential with Joint Services Board that they, I'll say, initially have expressed some interest. They may be interested in doing something there with us as well. And longer term, I'll say net zero energy, basically that's, if the business case looks feasible for that, and where some of the emerging technologies, particularly wind and others, and electric fleet, we're seeing more options starting to come online in the market, that when it gets to the point that those make sense for us from a business case perspective to bring those in. So also part of that is just a basic, we'll start with an energy efficiency audit, just see where some of the, say the low hanging fruit we can pick off in terms of our basic operations. But longer term, there looks to be good potential in terms of electric heavy equipment coming on, but also pairing that with wind, which we are getting some interest for folks to expand the wind options from the existing turbines. So there may be opportunities to leverage all that together at some point. But again, when...
Oh, yep, sorry about that.
What do you mean by the expanding the wind up?
Well, do have one turbine at the end of the industrial
Yeah.
park, and there has been some interest in possibly adding a couple more turbines, because partially the province has been pushing it a little bit for the sort of the broader, like, say, Wind West and just generally speaking, but that area is a relatively favorable location for more, so there may be an
So would
opportunity.
we own them ourselves or?
It's
private
hard,
sector?
it's way too early to say what exactly that will
What you're
look
looking
like,
at.
but they've expressed some interest to explore what may be possible, so.
That's a good idea.
From our previous wind development, I was under the understanding that we were somehow restricted by how much the grid would accept in that area.
That would have to be part of the discussion, but there may be an option that there may be a size of a turbine that works just for our own internal operations. So so effectively take the landfill off the grid itself.
Okay.
So, but again, we would have to explore what that would look like from a business case perspective, but where things seem to be heading, that there is a window in the foreseeable future that may be viable.
Good. And how many years do we have left on the existing turbine? Is it 9 years or something?
2032,
Yeah, 23.
2032, I
32,
think
yeah.
it is, yeah.
Okay. And then what happens if sorry to, Dick, what happens
It's
after that?
2032.
Because the COMFIT program then comes to an end, I believe. But it's still, hopefully the hardware will still be functional. And what happens with the Nova Scotia Power and the agreement or?
That, I'm not entirely sure where. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, I guess that would be
Yeah.
part of this whole study.
yes, and that may be the whole,
You know, I think at the time, we realized that the tower itself, that the hardware sits on top of would probably be in good shape, even if the hardware had to be replaced.
anything we've seen so far would suggest it should be able to go past the 2032 at this point, so.
Okay, good. Sorry to,
Oh, no, yeah.
I think it's more the power purchase agreement is what expires in
It's,
2032.
yeah, it's the, as I say, the agreement itself, and, yeah. So with that, again, continuing, the longer-term goals is to look at other options to extend the lifespan of the landfill proper, so there may be feasibility sites for future disposal areas and/or new sites, but I think. And also, we're sort of looking, there's a sort of a reuse it market, so to try to, similar to Valley Waste has a sort of a reuse it store that there's certain materials that they can reclaim and then resell back to the public at a reduced cost, because honestly, there's a lot of materials that come out off the trucks that are, oh yeah, fairly good, and let's say one person's garbage is another person's treasure, and so there may be a space to facilitate some of that further, and then obviously just maturing our asset management practices with that, so. We'll jump into the market assessment part again. This is where some of the sensitive information we'll probably get into in camera a little bit later, but in terms of our existing customers, we do cover Lunenburg, Kings, and Annapolis counties under our existing contracts, so based on the 25 data, Valley Waste obviously is our largest customer. HRM has now crept into, they're now our second largest customer, and then South Shore Waste, or Joint Services Board, they're third right now, so relatively close, but you can see where the majority of our customer base sits with that. Solid waste industry, obviously fairly regulated about that, largely from the provincial level, though we do get touched on by the feds sometime as well. The existing framework, this initially came in 1998. The goals were to better protect human health and the environment by reducing the number of active landfills across the province, strengthening technical and operational requirements for that, increasing diversion of hazardous and recoverable materials from disposal, and establishing Divert Nova Scotia to lead some of those diversion efforts and programs, and enabling municipalities to control flow of waste generated within their jurisdictions to help with that. And regulatory updates since then have generally been falling in line to reinforce those initial objectives. And generally, the industry has seen increased consolidation and a lot of smaller private facilities that have been in operation when these regulations first came in, have basically either closed or have been acquired by larger operators. So, I'll say sort of risks and opportunities. So basically, this is not a new trend to Nova Scotia. It's basically consolidation has been increasing within the private sector, just across North America in general. Municipalities still continue to play a key role in terms of ownership of key assets, so landfills, MRFs, transfer stations, and that. However, particularly in Nova Scotia, waste collection transportation services is largely done by a number of major private players now. And 4 of the 7 municipal landfills in the province are now either owned or operated privately in that. So obviously some risk is reduced competition and reliance on fewer private contractors and what that does with pricing within the market. But on the other hand, it does position us well
Councillor
with that. And then.
Thank you, Deputy Warden Rio. I just, when you're saying, so these private are owned, did they develop the landfill, or did they buy them from the municipalities, or is it a combination? I'd be interested in that.
I would say 3 of the 4 were previously owned and initially developed by the municipality. And then I think the 4th one was a P3, or quickly evolved into a P3.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, and then with that, also the opportunities that also provide to leverage our existing capabilities to attract new opportunities and explore alternative service models. And then just sort of in general trends, so basically sort of diversion rates across the province has generally been relatively flat the last little while. Hasn't, whether the impact of EPR, that's to be determined on how exactly that all plays out in terms of diversion rate, but also just the impact on basically everybody within the system and how that all plays out in terms of collection, transfer stations, et cetera, et cetera. Waste volume growth has been tending to trend up along with the population as well, so that's not unusual, and that may grow a little bit further, particularly if the development within HRM continues to grow as it is. It may drive everyone else. The regulatory environment is getting progressively more restrictive in some respects, so it's certainly not going to relax anytime soon, but certainly we're seeing more. Obviously, the methane requirements now, that's a new one, and there's growing evolution in ground and surface water in that, but that's not just strictly solid waste, but that's, we'll get caught up in some of that as well. And then, I'll say competition consolidation, which sort of touched on already. So in terms of the operating plan right now, some of this is just obviously items the council's aware of. So it's the landfill itself on municipality-owned land, and there's capacity for expanding within the existing footprint and in the industrial park as well, since those are all lots currently we own as well. The benefit we have from all that is that there's a fair number of clay deposits close to us, our proximity to road networks, and certainly a large buffer between us and our nearest neighbors. With that, and we're already zoned for industrial use as well. Currently operating 8 to 4, Monday to Saturday. And we're currently approved to accept, we have formal approvals to operate for municipal solid waste, C&D, household hazardous waste, and septage as well. And there's a number of sort of sub-waste streams within those. That, and obviously our contracts with Valley Waste, South Shore Waste, Circular Materials, GE Environmental, with Town of Lunenburg, Regroup, and Sustain inform our operating plan as well. Obviously our personnel is myself, Emily as our customer service recycling coordinator, and our supervisor. We have a scale house operator. We have a number of heavy equipment operators and our 2 landfill attendants. Currently, obviously we have a key one is our compactor and the industrial shredder. We also have a number of 3 excavators, the front end loader, and the off-road truck, and also tandem truck that we're still using. They perform different services. So all that's used to basically for the processing of waste, grading, compaction of final cover end also of the waste, placement of cover, and also allows us to manage any waste handling or storage areas, like say at the public drop-off. So all those bins there, perform number of site maintenance tasks, and just supports general site transportation needs as needed. So, but this complement obviously is going to change over time, just as operations evolve and that, so that'll, and also deal with changing volumes and composition, so that. We are working with finance in terms of a little bit more of a, formal finance plan, but, so that's in the works, so the sort of next iteration of this, we'll come back with the next iteration after we've had a chance to digest some of today's discussion. Any questions on this part of it?
Okay, Counselor Bremner.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. First of all, kudos to the forefathers that were at this table and ladies that made this happen, because I think this is a win-win for our municipality. I think we showed that leadership this year with our tax savings and adjustments and the money we've made off of.
Well, I think the only one there that can take credit for that is Warden Weber.
Well, I'm giving credit to whoever was responsible, because in my opinion, this is a win-win for our municipality. I do have a series of questions. I like the idea of looking at this as a business, to get this where we can continue to grow. You said it, one person's trash is another person's treasure or gold. We have that opportunity. We can do phases, we can do a number of things. My first question is, of course, if we go to a more business operation, does the level of staff and the equipment and items you have now give you that opportunity to make that slow but growth for the next number of years?
I think we're positioned for where we're at right now, and certainly where those right at the moment would tend to see those projecting out. There may be some adjustments if we do some of these other business opportunities. Not to say that may change a little bit in terms of this mobile unit might have a little bit different, but based on where we're positioned right now, yes, I feel we're in a good spot for the foreseeable future.
And some of this is clarity for me. Our water runoff, fossil items are monitored by the province or tested on a
Yes.
regular basis?
Yes, we have a whole environmental monitoring program that Nova Scotia Environment requires us to follow, so.
And if you get my drift on some of these questions, these are things I'm going to face from the public
Oh, for
once we
sure.
hear that. One thing that I've brought up, and I've talked to other counselors, and I've mentioned it to you, I notice as we travel Highway 14 now, there's a growing garbage problem along the side of the roads. I see styrofoams, I see bags. This may not be our contractors, this may be other folks hauling things out. And Highway 14, I would hate to see to become a dumping ground of garbage. I'd like to see us include somehow here a biannual trip where somehow we make a collection of that. Most visible stuff for sure, that does make our area look ugly.
It's something that certainly we can look at, and certainly the one thing we're trying to do in the interim, and this is also part of the provincial regulations, that being insistent on folks making sure their loads are covered before they come out here, so, not to say that's a foolproof.
That's
but
another issue
it's
and a half, but-
education in that, but it's like, it's at least, if they're making sure it's fairly well covered,
Weight cover.
it should mitigate a lot of that, but as you say, that definitely,
You can
the
see
last
it
few
more and
weeks,
more,
it's
yeah.
been,
It's increasing, and I noticed that.
more
I had
prevalent, so.
a couple of people that are family related call me and say, I can see this happening, and
I think
am more
it's, yeah, I think
concerned.
our seasonal folks are coming in, so they're getting cleaned up and,
Right.
yeah. it's-
Will this create any challenges for our fire protection out there? You're very well aware, you're 30 to 45 minutes away from any response coming from either Windsor, South Rawdon, Southwest Hants County there, and Chester.
Yeah.
Will we have to look at something if we go bigger in business and more different
Not-
materials?
It depends on more of the materials. I think in terms of necessarily just more volume, I don't think it necessarily necessitates more. We'd have to look at it. I think where we've got to now, I think we're better equipped to handle it, but it's something we'll have to look at the gear, because certainly the fire truck we do have out there now, it is older and there's not as common, so we may have to, that one, depending on availability of parts, we may have to look at, and there's also certain other things we're looking at in terms of making sure that the water access not only is our pond, but there's a nearby lake that we've had some coordination with DNRR about, so we have some of that. But it's also, it is something that we are definitely actively looking at, because it's, as
You
you
do
say,
have
we're.
emergencies from time
we're-
to time.
Unfortunately, we have to put, we suffer a little bit from that, so as you say, we're on our own for a little while until the fire department can actually get out, so.
Okay, I have two more questions. Seniors, I had an experience here in the district, my district, that a senior called me and said, I'm unable to find anyone to help me with a truck to haul things from my place. I had to hire a contractor, I have to pay that contractor, then that contractor charges me for
yeah.
the stuff that gets taken away. And, you know, that may be something we can look at if they, I don't know how you make that work, but this person thought, you know, I'm stuck. I'm 80 years old, I don't have any way to get stuff to the landfill, had to get a contractor to come in, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's something we look at. I think the Fundy Region Mall doesn't quite fit exactly that, but it's not to say something we could
Okay.
look at and look at
particularly
down the
seniors.
road, whether or not it makes sense for us to step into that space or not. That's something we can look at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I realize that. I just think for our seniors, if
Yeah.
we're working with them, that might be something.
Yeah.
And the last thing I ask, I'm sure these, and you note the 3 different groups that come here a lot, do they all get there by the time of closing day, or do we have to often stay later, and are they charged for that, or do we just do it in kind?
I'd say most days they're usually pretty good at getting there on time. The odd time there's an issue, we sort of assess on a case-by-case basis whether a lot of times we just stay behind or not that late necessarily, or only, like, say, at 4 o'clock, they're like at 4:15, just
Right.
because they've had truck issues. That we try to work with, look on case by case. I'd say none of them have become abusive about it, I'll just say.
Good, that's
So
good to
it's-
know, yeah. Just in case
Yeah.
they would take advantage of our kindness and our location,
no.
and we compensate staff accordingly.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah.
Perfect,
But knock on wood, it's not very often, but they're usually pretty good at giving us a call if they know there's issues, like say one of their trucks have broken down, or, you know, they've had an upset issue at their facility, so they're running behind.
They're
so.
en route. Thank you, Deputy Warden.
Okay, any other, oh, here we go, Councillor Asif.
Thank you. I just, you know, we're looking at this as a, you know, growing business for a landfill, basically. So what model, like if you look at the private landfill, I mean, obviously, they're making money,
Yeah.
that's their business. So can you tap into any of their model? Like, how do they do it? Or, I know it's probably, you know, you can't get into their internal stuff because with contract, I just have a hard time to figure out how we're gonna grow this. Like, what are our options? We can go after business.
I think that'd be,
In camera.
in camera, it'd be better
Okay.
discussion, but I'll say,
I just,
we've,
yeah,
I would say we have definitely turned our mind to that,
okay.
Yeah. Working peasy.
yeah.
All right, well, maybe, okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Connors.
Thank you. So really just as, maybe to challenge back or to speak back to Councillor Bremner's suggestions and comments. One, in particular, the senior being challenged, or anyone being challenged in terms of getting, and that's a challenge for anyone that doesn't have a half-ton truck or a trailer in their family. And I'm not suggesting that Chester would want to entertain this or the greater area, but the Facebook site that we started here, but now I believe Ms. Mulrooney looks after the Lean On Me, the municipal site, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's not a municipal site.
I
but-
know, no,
Yeah.
when I said municipal, I didn't mean
Yes.
like big M, I meant small
Yes.
m, like the region, maybe. But just to put that out there maybe, because I know that we do that every day. I'll see a post in New Ross, Neighbors Helping Neighbors around, you know, anyone heading to the valley, can you pick up my prescriptions? 3 people respond within 2 minutes, right? I'm looking at doing, coming in and doing a septic cleaning. Anyone want to piggyback and get the company in, and we'll do 3 and get a better rate. So I'm just suggesting, but we don't seem to have the problem in New Ross around getting neighbors with a half-ton truck or a trailer. It's typical that we can do that and help out. So I'm just suggesting that as maybe something, and I know, maybe that's for me to do, to suggest it to the Lean On Me administrator, I'm not sure, or anyone listening to the public. Also too, this is my ignorance, but Scott, did you mention, do we have a fire truck at the landfill?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I guess I knew
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
And we're, forever looking at upgrading or replacing or getting a second one. I'm not sure what New Ross is doing with their extra one now, but we just added to our fleet. So we have one that I noticed in the bay 2 nights ago. It's humongous. It's larger than one we have now, to date. So we're probably looking at maybe negotiating. Yeah.
I certainly appreciate the heads up on that. We may
Yeah.
well reach out to them. about
And,
that.
maybe I'm,
That's-
overstepping because maybe we have plans for that one, but I think we replaced it for.
We
for
can always
reasons, right?
ask.
Yeah, so it's very exciting times.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, before we go in camera, some just general comments. I mean, I'm excited personally to be talking about like a pivot from being like a defensive municipal utility to more of an aggressive regional player. I think that's exciting, and it's about time. I think there's some risks here as the privatization of solid waste continues. Those same companies that are privatizing landfills also have the hauling contracts oftentimes. So then you have, I think, I don't really know the answer to this, Scott, and you can help us. When we're negotiating hauling of curbside waste, are we negotiating then with municipalities? But when it's like commercial waste that is privately picked up, then the haulers will choose where they're gonna take that. They could take it to East, to Hants, they could take it to us. They decide where they're gonna go. How does that work exactly?
I would say, broadly speaking, each municipality has the ability to regulate where their solid waste can go to. So I would say, broadly speaking, without getting into specifics that we may get into in a few minutes, along that line would be the path forward, but there's,
But the ICI waste, yeah.
the ICI, yeah, in
So
theory,
that they have the haulers have the opportunity to choose where they wanna go.
yeah.
That was my understanding as well. So in a way, that's a weakness, because our competitors, if you will, have the ability to choose that stream of waste where it's gonna go. Yeah, obviously, one of our strengths is that we're on the border of, the biggest municipality in Nova Scotia. It has half the population of Nova Scotia, and that's our boundary. So there's obviously some opportunities there, I think, I think one of our weaknesses, of course, is that Valley Waste, HRM, and So Shore Waste, they make up 90% of our volume. So diversifying somehow, trying to find a way to diversify our customer base would be, obviously strengthen up our position. If we lost a big contract, that could be, it would be a pretty big problem for us.
Yeah.
All right, so those are just a few general comments. Do we want to go in camera then and just talk about the figures?
Motion to re-camera.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.